If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Yesterday was my daughter's senior recognition day for her bowling team. And she, I got a little bit of a tear in the eye because I started having to deal with reality. This whole year I've been talking about, my daughter's a senior. She got accepted to Duquesne Pharmacy School. She got me a Duquesne Dad sweatshirt at Christmas. But when you start to do these senior type activities, the reality of the situation kind of starts to set in for you. And I believe for Pirates fans today, the reality of the situation that Scott and I have been talking about coming to fruition throughout the entire offseason kind of culminated with the signing of Tommy Pham. Not what we really wanted to see, maybe what we expected, but we're going to talk about it here. Scott, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good. Congratulations on the Duquesne Dad thing. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
But yeah,
same.
Tommy Pham, I think that we had in mind a group of players. They had to make some kind of move, and we thought out of a handful of players that would likely be one of these guys. And for me personally, Tommy Pham was on the low end of that list. But as Pirates fans, we're kind of conditioned to expect the worst, right? And so this is what we got. Reality is setting in. Deadlines are starting to hit. Pitchers and catchers reporting soon, and the crunch has really started to be felt by the front office.
Yeah, and with Tommy Pham, that was, like you said, we had a list of guys we had brought up, like an Austin Hayes, a Ramon Luriano, mention, Gritchick, all these other guys, and all of these guys are signing for right around the same amount of money. I would have probably put Gritchick just because of his ability to hit left-handed pitchers, maybe towards a little bit towards the top of that list. Everybody knew that Austin Hayes is a guy that I think has the potential to bounce back because the second half of the season, it was actually a kidney infection that took him out, not any type of injury. So as long as that would be cleared up, then hopefully he would be able to bounce back. Liriano gives you a glove. But yeah, Tommy Pham, there's things that he kind of does well. It's the stuff that Charrington and everybody there kind of likes that he does well. And you open up the stat cast and you look at the chase rate. He's in the 97th percentile, only chases 18.7% of the time, squares the ball up, 86th percentile there, 29.7%. He's a guy that has, a better exit velocity, doesn't do great on the barrels, but he's a guy that, when he is making contact, he's making solid contact, doesn't chase, is very patient at the plate, professional hitter. And that is, right in Charrington and his scouts and everybody's wheelhouse that's within that front office.
Yeah, and if we can get the 2023 Tommy Pham, that could really make a difference. 16 home runs, a 774 OPS, 1.5 B WAR. So, if he can bounce back, that could really provide a little extra pop, professional at bats. I think that something that really could have made a difference last year with the team is putting the ball in play, not striking out as much, capitalizing when we have runners in scoring position. It make that little bit of a difference, a couple of runs because we're going to have a solid pitching staff. The rotation is going to be as strong as we've seen in quite some time, you would think, knock on wood. And then the bullpen, that's going to be the real show me kind of thing. There is has been able to piece together a bullpen, so we're going to need a few extra runs. We're going to need to capitalize on those positions. You know, we'll see what the Matt Haig approach is. If it's going to be as patient and walk centric as maybe the Andy Haynes version was, seemed like the guys were looking to maybe take those walks if they could get them, and that could help you get runners on base and move into position with aggressive base running. But you need that veteran who can. Had a 51.4 hard hit percentage rate last year for Tommy Pham. A guy that can sting the ball, can maybe drive it with some authority, that can help with sacrifice flies, things like that. Play a version of small ball.
Yeah, and with Tommy Pham, I mean, that's what you're saying is it's almost like you don't know what version of Tommy Pham you're really gonna get because I think when the signing first happened and we were kind of like talking back and forth, just making the jokes that I think that at least at some point in time he's going to make us laugh because he's not a guy that either ever minces his words. He wears his heart on his sleeve like overly because if anybody, kind of takes out the catcher, if somebody slides too hard into Joey Bart, I mean, Tommy Pham's going to be like the first guy at the top of the steps to back his guy up, but then he's also going to be something if he perceives it to be a slight against him or against one of his players. He could kind of get distracted a little bit and go off the end in that. I think that he said at one point in time last year during a White Sox interview that he trains to fight in the offseason. I mean, the guy's like jacked. He does like Muay Thai and like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, and is absolutely looks like a menace. But yeah, that's the other part of this is if you can get him off to a hot start and you got a happy Tommy Pham, then that can be a really good thing. But if you get an upset Tommy Pham or a disappointed Tommy Pham, playing for the worst team in Major League Baseball in the White Sox last year before he gets traded, you don't know how things are going to turn out with him. And like you said, Scott, I think you said, I'm just not going to join a fantasy football league with him.
Absolutely. But he's going to make sure nobody screws around in that fantasy football league. That's for sure. There's going to be consequences.
It's definitely a funny thing. And you mentioned like the playing of small ball, and that was something kind of even before we signed Pham and the Pirates signed Pham that I had been kind of really thinking about. Got to give some kudos out to Josh from Bridge to Bucktober. Him and Jake did a really detailed podcast. It was on Alex Verdugo, and the way that he hit the ball when with runners in scoring position, and that if there was a runner on, it wasn't like he was a guy that was going to strike out. And there's a lot of good things there. He also like made it into a piece over at Steel City Pirates. So anybody that hasn't, go listen to that podcast, go read that article, because even though Verdugo hasn't signed anywhere yet, so I guess there would be maybe some sort of miracle that him and Tommy Pham are the platoon option in like right or left field there. But for the most part, I think that like it kind of got me thinking about the Pirates with runners in scoring position last year. And obviously, as a team that, didn't score a ton of runs, they're not going to be a team that has, the most runners in scoring position. For reference, the Arizona Diamondbacks were they had 1,742 plate appearances with runners in scoring position, but Pittsburgh was right in the middle of the pack. They were at 15 with 1,497 plate appearances with runners in scoring position. So they definitely got those guys into position to score. They, had those opportunities. It was what was done with the opportunity. So think of yourself at the middle of the pack, and then you go to the number of strikeouts that the Pirates had with runners in scoring position, 377th, fifth in the league with runners in scoring position. So not only do you not have as many guys as some other teams that when you do, you strike out. I went with, batting average. The Pirates are sitting at 26th with a 230 batting average, the best, Arizona 285. On base percentage. That's the other part is Arizona. They got everybody on base. They got them in position. They were the best with batting average. They were the best with on base percentage. And then you have the Pirates creeping up to 25th for 310 on base percentage. So that's like the biggest thing to me is that we kind of talked about earlier on in this off season, and it's not like maybe it's a version of small ball, and the Pirates have to be doing stuff differently because power costs money. People keep on asking where is the power going to come from. Well, last year the Pirates with not a ton of power, I think 160 home runs total, had a lot of opportunities, and we've kind of been talking about getting a lineup of players that may not help you. I mean, they're obviously going to help you, but not to the degree that a home run hitter might, and change the outlook of the game very quickly. But they're not going to hurt you in that they're going to put the ball in play. They're not going to strike out as much. They're going to make good contact. You put the ball in play, things can happen. So yes, it's not exciting, but to think about the fact that, the Pirates, I was surprised were that high when I started to look up on that because I was wondering what my findings were going to be. And I was just thinking, well, they probably didn't have a lot of guys in scoring position because they didn't score a lot of runs. And no, that wasn't the case. I mean, they weren't as high as some teams, but I mean, they obviously were right in the middle. And if you, bring that average up by 20 some points, you bring the on base percentage up by, 20 some points, slugging, whatever it may be. I mean, those equate into runs. And with the pitching staff that the Pirates are projected to have and that we think they will have, that equates to runs, that equates to wins.
Yeah, I think get them over, get them in is a version of small ball. And as nice as it would be to have big power hitters, home run threats all the time, I think guys that can hit doubles, that can hit the ball into the gaps, I think that that is a strong way to improve your offense and drive in some runs. And we saw that last year. It seemed like they were consistently getting guys to lead off with doubles or singles and steal second. But then, like you were illustrating there, strikeouts, grounding to the left side of the infield, not getting the guy over. So that's where having another veteran hitter can improve things, and hopefully having the new hitting coach can take that to the next step and instill some of those fundamentals, because there's multiple ways to win a baseball game. It's not, and I know that that's what's in vogue now in baseball is to hit the ball over the fence, but there are ways to win baseball games without hitting as many home runs. It's not as sexy, but I I like a good a doubles hitter.
Yeah, if you can get a guy that hits gap to gap and you got guys running all over the bases, I mean, like you said, the home run is pretty much king right now, but it can be just as effective. And yeah, the number of times we saw guys get a double and then just basically just stand out there and not even make it to third base. And they it was absolutely insane to me. And that's where I'm thinking, like, I don't know exactly where this kind of lineup goes with Tommy Pham because I mean, it was something that we had said because when you said Pham question mark question mark question mark, and I said he's an outfielder and he's right-handed, and not that that's what we were calling for. It's what I was kind of expecting them to do, just because of the potential and the ceiling that you have with a Jack Sawinski. Obviously, you have that floor, that we saw last year, but that's going to put. And that's why, like when Josh brought up Verdugo, I started to buy into it at least a little bit because I was thinking, okay, Verdugo's not a great hitter, but he's not going to be like he doesn't have the potential for that cavernous level. He has kind of like that high floor, low ceiling where Jack has low floor, high ceiling. I mean, the variables of what could happen to him are kind of all over the place. So now you have Pham, who's a right-handed hitter. People did point out that he had a little bit of a reverse splits last year, but for me, it was more on like the batting average. If you looked at it, I think the OPS against right-handed and left-handed was exactly the same. But for his career, he does, hit the left-handed pitchers better. So then you're pretty much taking the stake in either Palacios is going to show you a little bit of that fire and what he can do and the pinch hitting and the clutch hitting and whatever it may be, in the beginning of the season. I guess at that point in time, it'd be the clutch hitting, not the pinch hitting. And then Sawinski can kind of sit down in AAA, get his stuff right, or they're going to come straight in and say, okay, Jack, shake off last year. We know what kind of hitter you are, and they're going to go, ground off the ground running with him this year. But it definitely makes it pretty interesting. And I guess you do have Frazier there as a left-handed hitter, but I don't really want to see Frazier in the outfield. I know that they said they would use him more in the infield. Has played some outfield, so you do have that other left-handed bat. But I mean, I feel like that if you have Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier both taking between 300 and 400 plate appearances during this season, I couldn't see the season going very well for the Pirates. Although Jack was cold last year at the beginning of the season, Cabrian had an absolutely awful season. Rowdy Tellez was horrible to begin the season, and the Pirates were still buyers and over 500 at the trade deadline with all of that stuff going on. So I guess there's still a possibility of that kind of happening again. But I just don't know how much of it, once again, could be maintained if you don't have those guys that you're really relying on. But Scott, I'm just kind of thinking, like, I mean, what does this look like for the lineup right now?
Yeah, I think that Jack is going to get every opportunity to be the starter. He's got too high of a ceiling to not give him every opportunity. He's already shown what he can do with the power bat in the major leagues. I think Palacios is, best utilized as a bench bat, that guy that you're using late, hoping to get the walk off. He just has a nice violent swing that can really connect. He just hasn't shown the consistency. He's that guy that's going to go up and, he's going to disappoint you 9 times, but in that 10th at bat, he's going to hit a big home run, and you're going to remember that at bat, and it's going to kind of overshadow some of the shortcomings. I think that, we're seeing how things are shaking up. I wouldn't be surprised because, you know, we don't know what the corresponding move is going to be for Pham. We saw Alika Williams get DFA'd earlier in the week, and so there's one fewer player that can potentially. Yeah, he's hung on longer than I think a lot of us expected. Um, but what's the move for Pham? But I think that you have a lot of questions. Up, they're going the platoon route. Now Tommy Pham's going to be the right-handed option in the corner outfield, whichever corner they decide to use it. And I think that Jack will probably be that left-handed option. And then you've got Horowitz at first base. Who do you have as your right-handed? I mean, I think that Horowitz is going to get an opportunity to probably play every day until he shows that he can't hit lefties. If that ends up being the case. But do you move Joey Bart into taking some reps at first base? You know, I- once Endy is ready to go, does Delay start as the backup? Where does Henry Davis fall in some of this? There's a lot of questions to be answered in spring training.
Yeah, and for me, it kind of like, I thought honestly, like I don't know what I was thinking really, because if I'm saying bring in a right-handed, outfielder, and then still having Billy Cook, on the bench, his only option at that point in time is realistically you are, you know, maybe DHing on a Koch day off, but that's kind of reserved for Reynolds at times. Ono Cruz to keep him fresh. We don't know with Cabrian's back what that's going to be. So then you would pretty much just be the first base platoon at that point in time. So this kind of, in my eyes, is maybe pointing to the fact that Billy Cook may be starting the year in AAA. You look at his minor league numbers, and especially last year, he had a over 1,000 OPS against left-handed pitching. So at least in the minor leagues, has shown that he can do that. They may want to see that. I hate that word, but I always use it. But that little bit of seasoning, that additional seasoning down there. I also talk about giving somebody a runway to kind of like start successfully and not really lean on him as much. I mean, it was kind of the same thing with bringing in Frazier. He is a left-handed bat in the infield. The only other one is Spencer Horwitz. So then, maybe York starts out, and if he, gets hot down there, then they start to push them out of the way. Um, I know that I've also been hearing people saying, "Well, I'd rather just see what we have with this person," and I mean, I kind of would too. Like, if it was my choice, I would probably have not signed a Tommy Pham, and I would have given Billy Cook his run. Um, and then maybe thinking about what Josh and Jake said on Bridge of October, bringing in a left-handed bat to not put so much pressure on Sawinski. I mean, maybe, I don't know, because Billy Cook is, around like he's 26 years old. We talked about him at the beginning of the offseason where he was one of those guys who lost that year in 2020, much like Alika Williams. Alika Williams was drafted in 2020. He's like a, Nick Gonzalez draft class guy. Lost like a full year of development there. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that's kind of like the plan, but if Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier come out flat, and so do York and Cook in AAA, then once again that's kind of where you're walking this tightrope. You're trying to thread this needle we keep on talking about of getting players to get hot and to get good at the same time, just like the Detroit Tigers did at the end of last season. That team went to the playoffs on a bunch of guys who, were getting called up because they traded away people. They had injuries on guys they had signed. And it was a bunch of young guys that came up and just kind of caught fire all at the same time. Obviously, have Tarek Skubal, that'll kind of help you, but we have Paul Skeens. So if that's maybe the plan a little bit, I obviously wouldn't be my plan, but I mean, it's the plan that we're going to have to live with right now. And I think it has, in my eyes, just as much of chance. We're like a 50-50, shot right now. I think it has much of a chance of working out as it doesn't.
I think I'm going to say a word here that Pirate fans don't necessarily like, and that's development. As much as we like to go into the off season and just spend some money or make a trade and plug those holes, it's not realistic for where the Pirates are and the current economics of baseball. And you need to improve from within. And the feeling I am getting is that they're going to rely a lot on development of guys that are already in the system. And I think we've heard that. That's what Charrington has said year after year is, well, the big step this year is going to be from within, development from guys within. Um, but it would be huge if some of these guys that we're talking about could take that next step and prove themselves to be everyday players. That if Jack could figure out lefties a little bit, that you could pencil him in every day. If Horowitz the same way can handle lefties, because it's a very small sample size in the major leagues for him versus lefties. But if some of these guys, because right now you have how many positions that you're talking about platooning, and you only have what 13 position players that you can carry. So you can't double up every single position and then still have guys on the bench. So it would be huge if Matt Haig could help some of these guys take that next step and become everyday players instead of platoon players.
Yeah, because it kind of seems like every discussion that really happens definitely is kind of like that platoon discussion. And I mean, I think that Charrington and the way that Shelton deploys it kind of happens that way as well. When Pham was signed, I saw some people out there, putting out the stats of him versus Connor Joe. I think it was Jason Mackey and Jim Rosati. I kind of put it out there, and I don't know what their intention was of that, because I mean it's pretty much for me. I felt like it was okay, we pretty much haven't improved. We've gotten, kind of the same type of player. I know that from other people I saw reactions from, maybe didn't take it that way. And it was just like, well, if we already had him and we had him for less money, why didn't we just keep Connor Joe? Because we liked Connor Joe, and Tommy Pham's a little bit of a loose cannon. But when me and you were talking about it, I kind of went, I think they got rid of Connor Joe because the plan was to get somebody better than Connor Joe. And that didn't happen. Now, is that a failure of Charrington's? Absolutely. That's something I will put on him. If that was your plan, that you are going to, not tender arbitration to Connor Joe, and your goal is to go out and get somebody better than Connor Joe, then you need to do that. And that's something that didn't happen. I don't know if he was trying to work a trade to get that to happen. I don't know if he was making offers to players to try to get them to come to play here. One of those people that's with kind of in that realm. But even if you get people within that realm, like I think by war and stuff, Gritchick would be the only one that would be light years above Connor Joe. So maybe with that, not happening. But for me, it's like, yeah, that's the failure right there. But like you said, uh, Charrington has said many times the success or failure of this what's going on here. He's always called it a build or development or process or whatever it may be, is going to be very reliant on the internal, what happens there internally. Like these guys are going to have to be the major, part of that. And then at the beginning of this offseason, I think people are finally coming around and have been mentioning it more, is that he said that it's going to be trades. Like they were looking more at trades than they were at the free agent market. And I take that for what it is. I mean, last year, Charrington spent over $30 million in free agency and got absolutely burned. This year so far, what's he spent? Like a tick under 15 million, and could get kind of the same results for those players. Who knows? Like that's where, like for me, I'm looking at the payroll and I'm looking at us being at $82 million right now. And last year, I believe they started the season around like 84, 85. By the end of the season last year, they were right around like 87 million. And we heard reports from a couple of different sources, not to us, but people were reporting that the payroll was going to be $100 million. And I think a lot of Pirates fans took that as it's going to be $100 million to start the season. That was not the case. The reporting that was made was that it was going to be $100 million at the end of the season, after guys are put on the 60-day, after probably some waiver acquisitions, injuries, guys called up, whatever it may be, as that fluctuates. And if we remember back to the last trade deadline and Charrington's remarks after the season, he said that he didn't have wiggle room. He had to make certain trades to clear off money to make other trades. When you had like a Jazz Chisholm, a Randy Arozarena, who were more expensive than Brian De La Cruz and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and maybe this year, if he has that flexibility, that he would be more likely or more able to make that type of move, you just have to hope that the Pirates have kind of a similar path we talked about at the beginning of the show. Even if guys underperform, they can still be buyers at the trade deadline. Because then right now you're basically gambling that what you've put together is going to produce the same or better as it did to the trade deadline last year. But for Cherington, he's also like threading that needle, walking that line. And he's going to say, you know what? I'm going to spend 15 million because as we pointed out, I don't know how many months ago now, Mitch Keller got a pay increase, which took out some of the money that people said they were going to be able to spend. You know, Brian Reynolds' contract's going up. There's different stuff going on there. So, I mean, he's leaving a decent amount of room, a large chunk of change. He's 18 million off at this point in time. But that's not to say they're not going to sign somebody else. But to me, that's where this payroll issue, and it always comes back to money, is that Cherington, if he has been given that thing that says you have $100 million till the end of the season, do you spend the other 18 million now and hope the players you get, work out? Or do you leave yourself that wiggle room and then try to add a more impact player that may cost a little bit more money at the trade deadline?
Yeah, you might look and see who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, and maybe already have some guys in mind. But you also have to have enough talent to put yourself in a position where you plan to be buyers at the trade deadline too. You can't get so cheap that you hamstring yourself. But a couple of points on things you said there about like the Connor Joe thing. Yeah, over the last 2 years they have eerily similar stats, Tommy Pham and Connor Joe. But Connor Joe, each of the last 2 years, and it's a trend throughout his career, he can start real high and then he goes off a cliff. If Tommy Pham can be more even keeled throughout the course of the season, imagine what that does. How many times did Connor Joe come up towards the end of the year in positions where you really thought he would have come through at the beginning of the year with the runners in scoring position, maybe to lead off an inning, and he just watched strike three go by. I mean, he's got a great eye for the strike zone, but we've talked about that too. You got to adjust to what the umpire's calling. And so, if you can have a more even keeled, more professional at bat throughout the course of the entire season instead of hot and cold, that could benefit. I think that that's something that we saw last year. So many guys had really high peaks and really low valleys, and that in the middle, a more sustained Brian Reynolds style of season where you know what you're going to get by the end of the year with Brian Reynolds, and it's pretty even keeled. And so I think that if you can kind of meet in the middle there and have it more evened out, that could be an asset to the team.
Yeah, and that's what it's kind of going to come down to is, and it's something we've talked about on a few occasions, is getting, I wouldn't say career years, but the most out of each player that you can. Uh, it comes back up again. I think Stephen Nesbitt reshared it that the largest external free agent, because they do have like a quote unquote technical free agent signing that was a little bit higher, but the external one was Russell Martin. It was like 2 years, $17 million. And we've gone back through this again, that Russell Martin was a slightly above replacement level player, not within the everyday range. He was a pretty much like a backup catcher type thing, and then became an absolute star for the Pirates for 2 seasons, and then dropped off again. And he had better seasons than he ever had in his career before. So to me, it's just like, okay, well, you have to hope that, we brought in Michael A. Taylor last year, and Michael A. Taylor had one of his best offensive seasons, and you're betting on that, and that doesn't happen. Rowdy Tellez is coming off of one of his worst, but you're looking for a bounce back, and that kind of doesn't happen. Jack Swinski goes into a hole. Everything I mentioned, so far in this podcast. So with the Pirates, it's like, okay, Key's back's got to be good. Jack has got to at least hit right-handers and put some over the fence. And Nick Gonzalez has to continue to take those steps forward. Jared Triolo has to take those steps forward. Ono Cruz in his first full healthy season, in the majors. Last year was not a full healthy season. He was coming back from a catastrophic injury, and really didn't turn on the juice on stolen bases or anything until like 3/4 of the way through the season. So, I mean, there are some things that can happen for this to be a good season. But like I said, right now I'm sitting on the 50-50 line that there's just like flip a coin. And until they start playing games, you have no idea what you're going to see from this team.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100% with that. Uh, until you start seeing what the guys are doing, even in spring training, and we know what spring training numbers can mean. We saw what Kevin Newman hit almost 600 the one spring, and that really didn't translate. Um, but yeah, it's gonna take. We're gonna need the revitalization of some older players, some big steps forward with younger players, and it's really going to have to come together because we're not the Los Angeles Dodgers, we're not the New York Mets, we're not even the New York Yankees. We have to catch lightning in a bottle to be a playoff contender. Those teams, and I know everybody. The big thing is about parity in baseball and no repeat champions. And when the fact of the matter is, those teams are perennial playoff contenders year after year after year, and you have a smaller group of other teams that are going to be cycling in and out to catch the lightning in a bottle to make the playoffs, and they have to have everything come together. You have to have that magic, that same magic that you talked about with the Tigers last year. There's a team or two that happens for every year. The Diamondbacks the year before that. Things just come together for those teams that have those magical runs, and you need to have those things come together and have those magical runs when you don't have the money. The Dodgers can just spend the money, and they basically have an invite to the dance. But other teams have to work harder, put things together. And so I think that, we'll see where things go with the salary cap, but based on the system that we have now, it's an uphill battle for teams like the Pirates. They have to rely more on development, identification of talent, and strategy. And that kind of comes together with everything we were talking about, how they're going to go about constructing lineups, how they're going to construct their roster, what kind of players they're going to put in there. How aggressive are they going to be on the base paths? What's their approach going to be if they can't provide the home runs? Are they going to be able to limit the runs from the other team if this pitching is going to be as good as we're saying it's going to be? Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all comes together, and I think that that's the part of it too is that they ended the season cold, and so everything just seems like it's up in the air. We just don't know what to expect going into spring.
Yeah, well, hope springs eternal. Players showing up in the best shape of their life season is about to begin. The guys that have, you know, I wouldn't say talk trash, but have kind of poo-pooed all of the stuff that the Pirates have done will see the players down there and will get a glow in their eye. And I mean, it happens to me too. When I go down there every year, it's just like the excitement of baseball finally being back. But in the end, man, games just they have to be played out. Don't take stock in too much of the spring training stats, and just basically at this point in time, next week pitchers and catchers will have reported for the Pirates. No games started yet, but we're like one step closer.